Welcome to another episode of Books in Bytes. Today we are diving deep into a novella by Leo Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It begins quietly, with the sound of footsteps echoing down the long marble corridors of a Russian courthouse. Men in stiff collars and heavy coats exchange polite words, their voices carrying that tone of restrained curiosity reserved for news that is both distant and intimate. A colleague has died. Ivan Ilyich, a man they once worked beside, shared tea with, perhaps even envied. And as they murmur their condolences, something unspoken trembles between them. A faint relief that it was he who died, not they. This, Leo Tolstoy tells us, is how life often begins to reveal its truth. Not in the moments of tragedy, but in the reactions of those left behind. Ivan Ilyich was, by all external measures, an ordinary and successful man. Born into the middle ranks of Russian society, he had learned early what mattered most in his world: propriety, reputation, and advancement. He was not cruel, nor particularly kind, just correct. He did what was expected of him. He studied law, entered government service, and moved through the bureaucratic ladder with quiet precision. His life was a reflection of how society defines a good man: diligent, respectable, and always in control. He married not out of passion, but out of convenience. His wife, Praskovia, was suitable, well-mannered, and socially appropriate. For a time, their marriage seemed tolerable, even happy, until the small irritations of domestic life hardened into mutual resentment. They stayed together not for love, but for appearance, for the order of things. Ivan found refuge in his work, in the clean, rational structure of the law. He took pride in arranging documents, in following procedure, in ensuring everything was done as it should be. In these little perfections, he found a sense of safety, a kind of moral anesthesia against the chaos of real feeling. But one day, while decorating his new house, a place he believed would symbolize the success of his life, Ivan suffered a small accident. He fell awkwardly while hanging curtains, striking his side. It seemed trivial at first, almost laughable, yet the pain did not go away. It deepened, quietly, persistently, like a whisper that refused to leave. He tried to ignore it, to bury himself in work and dinner parties, but the pain became a presence, invisible yet constant, inhabiting his body like an uninvited guest. Doctors came and went, each cloaked in their professional certainty. They used words, Latin ones mostly, that sounded impressive but hollow. Ivan watched them with growing dread, realizing that beneath their confidence lay the same ignorance he felt. One doctor would say it was a floating kidney, another an inflammation of the appendix, and yet another would advise rest and a change of diet. But no matter what they called it, the truth was the same. His life was slipping quietly out of his control. As weeks turned into months, Ivan's world began to shrink. The pain grew sharper, spreading through his side and into his being. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was spiritual, existential. He tried to work, to smile, to maintain the image of dignity, but inside he was unraveling. His wife's concern quickly turned to annoyance. His children avoided him. The servants whispered about him in the hallways. And in the lonely silence of his bedroom, Ivan Ilyich began to face something he had never truly considered: that death was not an abstract event that happened to others. It was his. There is a moment in Tolstoy's story that feels almost unbearable in its simplicity. Ivan sits alone, staring at the blackness of night, and realizes, I am dying. Not metaphorically, not someday, but now. The thought strikes him not as an intellectual idea, but as a raw terror that claws at his soul. He tries to reason with himself. I lived properly, decently, as one should. Why should this happen to me? Yet the more he repeats this, the more hollow the words sound. What if, he begins to wonder, everything he lived for, the career, the social climbing, the polite dinners, the careful moderation, was all a lie? What if his entire life had been wrong? Tolstoy captures this descent into awareness with piercing clarity. His mind turns in circles, searching for meaning where there is none. The rituals of the world, the polite visits, the worried doctors, the prayers, all seem absurd in the face of what he now knows. Death is not polite. It does not respect rank or manners. It strips everything away, leaving only the naked truth of a life lived either authentically or falsely. In this darkness, one figure shines with quiet light. Gerasim, the young peasant who tends to Ivan during his illness. Gerasim does not hide from death, nor does he pretend it's something else. He sits by Ivan's bed, holds his legs to relieve his pain, and speaks honestly. "We shall all die someday," he says gently, without fear. In Gerasim's simple acceptance, Ivan glimpses something pure. A life unburdened by hypocrisy, lived in truth rather than performance. For the first time, Ivan feels what it means to be truly seen and cared for, not because of duty, but because of human compassion. As the illness worsens, Ivan's days blur into one long, tormenting stretch of time. Every hour is filled with agony, not just of the body, but of the soul. He screams, he weeps, he prays for it to end. Nights become eternal, mornings bring no relief. He watches his wife pretending to pity him, his colleagues carrying on with life, and he feels a growing fury at the absurdity of it all. Why do they continue as if nothing is happening? Why does the world go on as he disintegrates? But beneath this anger lies a deeper terror, the realization that he is utterly alone in this journey. No one can share his pain or cross the threshold with him. Death, he now sees, is not a moment, but a process, a long and humiliating stripping away of everything one once thought permanent. Then, one day, something shifts. After endless nights of despair, Ivan stops struggling. He begins to look inward, not for escape, but for understanding. He recalls his life, the small cruelties, the neglected kindnesses, the emptiness disguised as success. He sees that he had lived not as his soul desired, but as society demanded. He had chosen comfort over truth, appearances over authenticity. For what? To end here, terrified and alone. The realization pierces him like light breaking through a closed window. For the first time, he feels not fear, but sorrow. Not for dying, but for never having truly lived. And then comes the moment of grace. As his final hours approach, Ivan's pain reaches its peak, and yet in that extremity he experiences something transcendent. He hears his son crying beside his bed, truly crying, not out of obligation, but love, and something softens in him. He looks at his family, at their fear and helplessness, and he feels compassion. He wants to say, "Don't be afraid." He wants to forgive them and to forgive himself. It is as though death itself, the thing he feared most, becomes the doorway to mercy. In his last moments, he stops asking why and simply surrenders. The darkness that once terrified him now feels like release, like truth. "There is no death," he whispers within himself, "only light." And with that thought, he exhales, not in despair, but in peace. Tolstoy leaves us there, in the stillness that follows a final breath. The story ends not with sorrow, but with quiet revelation. Through Ivan Ilyич's suffering, Tolstoy exposes a universal truth, that most of us live lives not of freedom, but of imitation. We follow patterns, chase approval, build walls of comfort, and call it living. Yet it is only when those walls begin to crumble when we are forced to face the nothingness beneath, that we discover what it means to be real. The Death of Ivan Ilyich is not merely a story about dying. It is a story about awakening, about how the proximity of death can reveal the falseness of life. It asks a haunting question. What if the fear of death is not really fear of dying, but fear of having never lived truthfully? Tolstoy's genius lies in how gently, how painfully he brings us to that question. As the last echo of Ivan's life fades, we are left not with despair, but with an invitation to live differently, to strip away the unnecessary, to stop performing, to seek sincerity in our work, our relationships, our hearts.
Because one day, each of us will face what Ivan faced, and in that moment, all pretense will fall away. And perhaps, if we have learned from him, if we have chosen authenticity over approval, compassion over convenience, then maybe when our own darkness comes, it too will open into light. This has been a reflection on The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, a story that reminds us that death, though inevitable, can also be our greatest teacher, urging us to truly live before it's too late. Thank you for listening to this episode of Books in Bytes. If you found meaning in this timeless story, remember to live truthfully, love deeply, and cherish the kind of beauty that does not fade with age.